You really think missing an exam to help some rich white lady was worth it? The professor's voice echoed through the lecture hall, his tone soaked in mockery. But Aisha didn't flinch. She had no idea that her quiet act of kindness that morning would lead to a helicopter landing in her backyard and change her future forever. The classroom buzzed with the chatter of students turning in their final exams. Papers shuffled, chairs screeched across the floor, and tension lingered in the air like the aftershock of a storm. Aisha sat silently in the back, her seat empty. Her name was called for the third time. No answer, no footsteps, just a void. She skipped it. Final exam? A student whispered. Probably out partying, someone muttered with a smirk. But the truth was far from it. 6 miles away, Aisha stood on the shoulder of a country road, her hands smudged with grease, her hoodie stained with sweat. The sun was barely up when she had spotted the stranded car while biking to campus. A woman, dressed in expensive clothes but clearly panicking, waved frantically at passing traffic. Most drivers sped past. Aisha slowed down. "You all right, ma'am?" she asked. Tears clung to the woman's lashes. "My husband. He's diabetic. Passed out inside. I called for help, but they said it'll take 40 minutes. Without a second thought, Aisha leaned her bike against the ditch and rushed toward the car. Inside was a man in his 60s, slumped and pale. Aisha had learned about diabetic shock from caring for her grandfather. She reached for the emergency snacks she always kept in her bag, just in case. Minutes passed. The man groaned, then slowly blinked. The woman sobbed in relief. "I think he's stabilizing. You need to get him to a hospital, but he's out of immediate danger," Aisha said, helping him sit up. The woman grasped her hands. "You saved his life." Aisha gave a small, tired smile. "Glad I could help, but I gotta go. I'm already late." She didn't explain what she was late for. She didn't mention the exam that counted for 40% of her grade. She didn't say that she had studied every night for 3 weeks straight, sacrificing sleep and food to memorize every formula. None of it mattered at that moment. Back at campus, her professor wasn't as forgiving. "She just didn't show. Rules are rules," he said, scratching a red X next to her name on the attendance sheet. Other students shrugged. Aisha wasn't a troublemaker, but she wasn't one of the golden ones either. No alumni parents, no trust fund. Just a quiet black girl in oversized hoodies who sat in the back, took notes, and rarely spoke. By evening, Aisha was curled on her bed, heart heavy. Her grade would drop. Her scholarship might be at risk. She wondered if doing the right thing had cost her too much. She never expected what would happen next. The next morning, Aisha woke up to the sound of helicopters on the news, not in her backyard. Her phone remained silent. No emails from her professor, no notifications from the school. Just the weight of regret tightening around her chest like a noose. She pushed through the day anyway. At the dining hall, she kept her headphones in, pretending to listen to music while avoiding eye contact with classmates who were still buzzing about how brutal the exam was. "You heard about Aisha?" someone at the next table whispered. "Yeah, she missed the final. I guess she flunked. She was always weird anyway." Aisha clenched her fork tighter but didn't respond. She wasn't weird, just tired of explaining herself. Tired of being invisible until someone needed help with their assignments, notes, or a ride home. She stayed late at the library that night, going over other course materials, hoping to salvage what little she could from the semester. But the numbers on the screen kept blurring. Her body was present, but her spirit was somewhere else. On that roadside beside the woman crying in a panic, clutching her husband's hand. Aisha couldn't stop wondering, who was she? The woman looked wealthy. Designer coat, expensive purse, polished nails, and she wasn't local, that much was obvious. So why hadn't she just called a private ambulance or taken the man to the ER herself? And why had no one else stopped? The next morning, Aisha's phone buzzed. Not with texts, but with a call, an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello? Is this Aisha Williams?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Sarah Whitmore. I believe we met 2 days ago. My husband. You helped him." Aisha sat up straight. "Oh, is he okay?" "He's stable now. We're back in New York. I had to call and thank you. You disappeared before I could get your name, but I tracked you down." Aisha blinked in surprise. "How?" "I asked around, and, well, it turns out being married to a billionaire gives you access to certain resources." She chuckled lightly. Aisha forced a laugh, unsure how to respond. Then silence lingered. "I need to ask something," Sarah said, voice more serious now. "Did you really miss your exam because of us?" Aisha swallowed. "Yes." Another pause, then, "You shouldn't have had to make that kind of sacrifice, especially not alone." That night, Aisha tried to sleep, but her mind spun with questions. Why call now? Why track her down? She still didn't know the Whitmores' full story. She had no idea they owned major real estate across the country, sat on nonprofit boards, and rubbed shoulders with mayors and celebrities. To her, they were just a couple in a car on the side of the road, one unconscious, the other terrified. But to them, she wasn't just a student anymore. She was the girl who stopped. And the consequences of that moment were about to become larger than anything she could imagine. The next morning, Aisha arrived on campus just like any other day. She blended in with the crowd, backpack slung over her shoulder, hoodie up, eyes on the ground. No one could tell she was still carrying the emotional weight of that day on the roadside. To them, she was just another student, a number, a GPA, a face in the hall, until the helicopter came back. Except this time, it landed. Not on the news, not at some billionaire's mansion, but right there, on campus, in the quad. Students screamed and pulled out their phones, recording from every angle. Professors paused their lectures as rumbling blades shook the windows. Campus security rushed toward the scene, but they weren't needed. Out stepped a sharply dressed woman in a white coat and sunglasses, followed by 2 suited men. She moved with calm confidence, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on Aisha, who stood frozen on the stairs, her notebook clutched to her chest. Sarah Whitmore. Aisha's mouth went dry. The woman walked right up to her, heels clicking against the pavement, undeterred by the eyes, the cameras, or the whispers. "Miss Williams," she said, removing her sunglasses. Everyone turned. The girl no one noticed yesterday? Suddenly, she was the center of gravity. Aisha stammered, "Yes?" Sarah smiled. "I believe you missed something important for my sake. I'd like to return the favor." Aisha blinked. I don't understand." "Let's talk," Sarah said gently. "Privately." She led Aisha toward the helicopter, her hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder. The crowd parted, stunned into silence. Someone dropped their coffee. A professor took off his glasses. Phones stayed up, recording every second. Inside the helicopter, Aisha sat across from Sarah, the city skyline shrinking below them. "My husband is alive today because of you," Sarah said. "You chose to stop when no one else did." "Do you know how rare that is?" Aisha looked down. "It just felt right." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "You didn't wait for someone to tell you it was okay to care. You acted. That's the kind of person the world needs more of." The wind roared outside. Aisha still didn't understand where this was going. "I made a few calls," Sarah continued. "Your school's dean, your professor. I've arranged for a makeup exam, fully credited. You won't fail the course." Aisha gasped, hands covering her mouth. "But more importantly," Sarah leaned forward, "I want to sponsor your education. Full ride, tuition, books, housing, everything." Tears welled in Aisha's eyes. "Why me?" Sarah smiled softly. "Because you saw a human being. Not a billionaire, not a stranger, just someone who needed help. As the helicopter circled back toward campus, Aisha looked out the window. At the buildings, the people, the world that no longer looked the same. She didn't know it yet, but her life had changed, and the whole town was about to find out. The next few days were a whirlwind. Aisha couldn't walk across campus without someone pointing, whispering, or approaching her with questions. Strangers who had never noticed her were suddenly following her on social media, requesting interviews, tagging her in viral clips of the helicopter landing. The girl who once blended into the background had become the headline. But for Aisha, it wasn't about fame. It was about understanding how one moment, one decision, could alter everything. She sat in her dorm room that evening scrolling through hundreds of messages. Some praised her. Others accused her of being part of some publicity stunt. And a few were downright hateful. She's playing the victim for attention. Another sob story goes viral. Typical. Bet the billionaire paid her off. Aisha's chest tightened. The racism she'd grown up with was always subtle. Side eyes in stores, teachers who didn't call on her, counselors who told her to aim lower. But now it was loud, cruel, public. She closed her laptop and looked in the mirror. Was it worth it? She'd missed an exam. She'd become the face of something she didn't ask for. She'd saved a life. And yet now her own was under a microscope. Her phone buzzed. It was a video message from Sarah. Aisha hesitated, then played it. "I know this attention isn't easy," Sarah said, her voice warm and steady. "But I need you to remember something. They're not attacking you. They're attacking what you represent. Compassion, bravery, and integrity in a world that's forgotten those things." Aisha felt her throat tighten. "You don't owe anyone silence," Sarah continued. "You didn't ask for the spotlight, but now that it's on you, use it. Show them who you are, not for them. For every young girl watching, wondering if her kindness will matter." A tear slipped down Aisha's cheek. That night, she opened her laptop and began to type. She shared her truth, every detail, why she stopped on that road, why she helped, how it felt to be judged, praised, and then judged again. She didn't hold back. She ended the post with, "I didn't stop to go viral. I stopped because no one else did. And if I had to do it again, I'd do it without hesitation." The post exploded. By morning, it had over 2 million views. Celebrities reposted it. Professors applauded her. Students who had ignored her now stood with her. Even her estranged father sent a message that simply said, "Proud of you." But the most surprising message came later that afternoon. It was from a woman in a hospital bed. Sarah, still recovering, still glowing. "I read your post," it said, "and I cried. You didn't just save my life. You reminded me why I wanted to live. You reminded all of us." Aisha stared at the message, her heart pounding. She was no longer invisible. She was undeniable. The following week brought more changes than Aisha ever expected. It started with a knock on her dorm. Doker. Standing outside was a woman in a tailored suit, holding a small envelope. "Aisha Grant?" she asked with a professional but warm tone. "Yes," Aisha replied hesitantly. "I'm with the Harrison Foundation. Mr. Harrison, Sarah's husband, asked me to personally deliver this to you." Aisha blinked. "He did?" The woman handed her the envelope and walked away with a polite nod. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Aisha, Sarah is recovering well, and every time she speaks, your name comes up. You didn't just save her. You gave her the strength to fight for her life. For that, I owe you more than I can ever say. Enclosed is something small to begin repaying that debt. With respect, Preston Harrison." Below the note was a folded check. Aisha's hand shook. It was made out to her, for $250,000. She gasped. Her legs gave out and she sat on the bed in disbelief. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. Freedom from debt, from fear of dropping out, from sacrificing her dreams. But more than that, it was validation. She clutched the check to her chest, overwhelmed by gratitude but also confusion. What was she supposed to do next? A second letter slipped from the envelope. This one bore a university seal. It was an invitation to speak at the university's leadership symposium, headlined as Aisha Grant, Courage in Action. Tears welled in her eyes again. The girl who once ate alone in the cafeteria was now being asked to share a stage with the world-renowned professors and entrepreneurs. But with the good came more attention. That night, a local news van parked outside her dorm. A reporter stood by the steps, waiting. Aisha hesitated. Should she hide? Run? No, not this time. She walked out chin high. The camera rolled. Aisha, how does it feel to be hailed a hero? The reporter asked. She didn't hesitate. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who saw another human in pain and decided to act. That shouldn't be rare. It should be normal. The clip aired on the 6 p.m. news and immediately caught fire. Her words were quoted everywhere. Students from around the country messaged her. Some said they'd started volunteering. Others said they confronted their own prejudices because of her. One message stood out. It was from a girl in Alabama. I never thought someone who looked like me could be seen, heard, or respected. You gave me hope. Aisha responded personally. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something bigger. A movement. The kind that doesn't start with marches or protests, but with quiet, brave choices. The kind that says, I see you, I will help you, no matter who's watching. And somewhere in a hospital room across town, Sarah smiled, watching Aisha speak on television, knowing that kindness had sparked a fire no one could put out. Aisha stood under the warm morning sun, her eyes fixed on the massive crowd gathering in the university quad. Banners reading, Unity, through action hung from the arches. Students, professors, community leaders, even media crews, stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting. She had been asked to deliver the keynote speech at the annual Unity and Justice Forum. What had started as a thank you letter and a check had spiraled into a movement that carried her name. But Aisha never let it go to her head. She stepped onto the stage in a simple blue blouse and jeans. No designer labels, no glam. Just her. Just real. As the crowd hushed, she took the microphone and began. I never set out to be seen. I just couldn't walk past someone who needed help. I believe we all carry more power than we think. Not in wealth, not in connections, but in choice. We choose every day who we'll be, what we'll stand for. And I chose humanity. Because kindness, real kindness, is never wasted. It's like a spark in dry grass. You won't always see where it lands, but eventually, something will burn. Thunderous applause followed, but Aisha held up her hand, signaling for silence. And one more thing. For anyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or unheard because of your color, your background, or your story, I see you, you matter, and if no one's told you yet, you are not alone. There was a pause. Then the entire crowd rose to their feet. Cheers, tears, hugs among strangers. Later that day, Aisha walked across campus. Alone. Reflective. That's when she heard it, a familiar voice calling her name. Turning around, she saw Sarah Harrison. Hair tied in a scarf, a little thinner, but alive. Radiant. Behind her stood Preston Harrison, the billionaire himself. The man who once seemed untouchable. He smiled and extended his hand, but Aisha, without hesitation, embraced them both. I came to thank you in person, Sarah whispered. You saved me. You saved me too, Aisha replied. Preston stepped forward and said, I've spent decades investing in companies, stocks, real estate, but you're the best investment I've ever made. Aisha chuckled. I didn't do it for a return. He nodded. Exactly why it worked. Then he handed her a thin black folder. Inside, an official partnership contract. The Harrison Grant Fellowship, a program to support underprivileged students pursuing healthcare and emergency response careers. Fully funded, named after her. Tears welled up again. The girl who almost missed her future because she chose compassion was now shaping futures for others. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and amber, Aisha stood still, soaking in the moment. One decision, one act of kindness. That's all it took to change her life, and hundreds of others. Because in the end, true power doesn't come from money or fame. It comes from choosing to care when it's easier to walk away. And Aisha Grant? She never walked away. She walked forward and lit the way for the world to follow.